Hi, it's Cami. We're back from our holiday break with more videos here on Throw Like a Girl TV, the gender equality channel here on YouTube. Today we'd like to talk about federations. Does yours represent you? Because chances are, if you're a woman or a girl who wants to play baseball, it doesn't. Now, why is this? Because the federation, the way I understand it, I'm a semi-expert, but the way I understand it is each country that wants to participate in international tournaments, something like the Little League World Series perhaps, the Olympics, the baseball World Cups that are run by the World Baseball Softball Confederation. Each country that wants to participate in these events has to have a federation that represents and runs baseball in their country. And all too often, I think, my opinion of course, but all too often those federations are baseball softball hybrids, which if you've listened to any of these videos, you know that I feel very strongly that people need to realize that baseball and softball are two separate and distinct games. So having a co-federation that's representing the interests of both sports doesn't make any sense. There's no softball football confederation. There's no lacrosse tennis confederation. There's no tennis badminton ping pong confederation. Because why would there be? Because they have separate interests, separate athletes, separate competitions, separate sports, and they all have their own dignity and honor and pride and everything. So every time you say, well, baseball's the dominant sport because that's for men, and then we have softball over here for women, you're diminishing women, who want to play baseball, and you're diminishing men who want to play softball. Now, I can't imagine there's tons of boys in the world that are growing up wanting to play softball for their country. Chances are they're mostly baseball players who didn't quite make it, and so they ended up playing softball instead. But still, they're very high-level athletes, and they get absolutely no recognition. And it's not okay. It's not okay for anybody who excels at whatever their chosen sport is to not be recognized because it's not really their sport, or it's not really something that men do. It's not really something that women do. Sport doesn't have gender. Society puts that monocle on there. And then anytime anybody wants to buck that trend, they're stuck hauling their whole gender around with them the whole time. So anyway, back to federations. So here's the big federation, right? And then all the organizations report to that federation in some way. They receive funding from that federation. They have to follow those rules. That's kind of how they do anything with their sport that they want to involve people in. So I have heard this from, I'm sure it's the same story in a lot of places, but for sure I know it's true in Ghana, I know it's true in the Netherlands, and I know it's true in the UK, that programs that want to promote girls and women to play baseball are not treated equally. In fact, they are, in the case of Ghana, they're specifically told, you need to tell girls to play softball instead of baseball, or we aren't going to give you any funding. Now that seems kind of blackmailish to me. It seems really quite wrong that that would be something that an official, sometimes governmental, sometimes organizational body would do, but yet it's what's happening. So in the case of the United States, it's a little more complicated because in most other states, most other countries, things are really much more top down from the government when it comes to national stuff. So, like the Japanese Baseball Federation, whatever its official name is, very likely gets a lot of funding from the government. And then they distribute that funding and they promote their programs and whatever. That doesn't happen in the U.S. It happens to a lesser extent in countries like Canada and Australia, where they have to get a lot of their own private funding as well. But in the U.S., there really is no funding for sport, and that doesn't matter what sport it is, unless you're something like the NFL and you have nonprofit status or some sort of nonsense like that. But as far as these, like the USA Volleyball, they have to get raise their own money. There's no Same thing with USA Baseball. So that USA Baseball is sort of considered the official federation of the United States, although there are other organizations. But again, that's because this is the ultimate capitalist society and everything is for profit, or even if it's nonprofit, it's for market share and it's for, whatever. The point is, there's no single one federation, but a federation has to be recognized from the country. So officially, USA Baseball is considered the Federation of the United States. But they don't represent everyone. And they, as far as I know, I've never heard anything about a men's softball program from USA Baseball, and why would you? Because there's also USA Softball. However, there's this sort of tiny little facet of women's baseball under USA Baseball, right? So for USA Baseball, I believe there are maybe seven national teams for boys and men, starting at like 10U, 13U, 15U, 16, something like that, and all the way up to college, and then the team that plays in the World Baseball Classic, that all-country competition that takes place in March. And then there's the women's national team. For every year there isn't a boys' national competition, there's a development program. Nothing over here. And so MLB is obviously the biggest baseball organization in the world and the wealthiest by far, and they could fix this problem with the stroke of a pen, but they haven't, in spite of getting requests. Anyway, so they are funding an initiative with USA Baseball, because MLB kind of funds USA Baseball instead of the other way, like getting it from the government, they get it from MLB, which again, they obviously have an agenda, they have a point. It's not neutral. I know I would love to think our government was neutral, but anyway. Anyway, so you have a private organization being funded by another private organization, essentially, that gets to make up their own rules. And there is no onus on them. There is no statute. There is no law that says you must have actual equality for men and women, because they're not taking money from the government. If it was an educational program like Title IX, it would fall under Title IX, and they would have to have, if they've got a boys 13U, they've got to have a girls 13U, or let those girls work in this program over here with the boys. But none of that's happening. In my understanding, there have never been a single girl named to any of the official national teams in this country other than the women's national team, which you cannot be on until you're 15 or 16. I think you can try out at 15, have to be 16 by play. Anyway, there's no parity there, and there doesn't seem to be any interest or anything in the pipeline to sort of create that. So MLB is like, all right, let's do this. So there's a couple of programs, and they're growing, and that's great, and it's been a couple of years, and it's scholarshiped, so it's not costing these girls anything other than the fact that if you're, a 16-year-old girl and you're playing high school baseball, you probably have a summer job, and you can't do that if you have to go, you want to go play baseball. And so again, like just about everything in this country, opportunities are different for people of means than they are of people without means. So there's still inequity there, even if you're saying, hey, look, this program doesn't cost you anything to come to, except you still have to buy your plane ticket. And if you're 14, your mom's probably going to come, or your dad. And, if it's a single parent, then you got to bring the kids, brothers and sisters, and there's a hotel. So anyway, what I'm wanting to talk about is the federations. And of course, funding is always the issue / excuse that they use, right? So there's a limited amount of funding, and we're going to give the funds to the teams and the players that have the best chance of succeeding or winning or going pro or whatever that description of success looks like. And for most federations, that's not men's softball, and it's not girls baseball, and it's not often women's baseball. There's a little trickle there, but the main focus is always on the men's baseball, because again, MLB is the big carrot, right? Or college scholarship. Like, these are real things that that young men have a chance to strive for, and none of these other groups do. You know, there's barely a women's professional league for softball, and there's, of course, nothing for men's softball and women's baseball. And it's the conflation that is really the problem, I think, as far as society is concerned, because I still run into people on a daily basis that don't realize that baseball and softball are different. In fact, we don't just call girls who play baseball softball players, right? Like they assume that they're somehow, these sports are the same, but yet we just call it different name for women, which of course is not true. They're very different games, which we've gone into in other videos. So the conflation. So as thrilled as I am that Jessica Mendoza has gotten, you know, I don't know if she's a household name yet, but she's probably pretty close despite the internet trolls. She's succeeding as a broadcaster on air. We get to see her in the booth. She's holding her own with the men. She's calling the games. As happy as I am for that sort of glass ceiling being broken, it's also a one step forward, one step back kind of situation, because she's known as being a softball player. So for a lot of people that don't want women in the broadcasting booth, that's a way to detract from her, because what does she really know about baseball? Because she's a softball player. And that's just giving them fuel for their fire. But the other thing is, again, you're holding up someone who's a prominent person, a high profile person, and you're saying, look, they're the same, you know, because she played softball, so she can talk about baseball, and she's a girl, so that's why she played softball, and boys play baseball, and C. And every time that happens, it makes it harder for girls to play baseball, because they're fighting this thing. It's just like, it's a friggin' tidal wave that just keeps coming and coming and coming. And back to federations, it is my deeply held personal opinionated belief that the organizations, the world federations, completely sold out their sports when they decided to unite. There used to be a separate baseball one, the International Baseball Federation, and there used to be a separate softball one. They decided to merge a couple years ago into the World Baseball Softball Confederation so they could put in a joint bid to get their sport back in the Olympics. Hooray, you did it, great. So now there'll be baseball for men and softball for women in the Japan Games in 2020. It's a very hollow victory because it's not a full participation sport. I'm not sure if they're considering exhibition sport, but I think it's limited to like 16 countries, and it's just a very, very tiny showing of these stick and ball sports that are not the same game, that they're not putting in. They should have put in softball for men and women, because more men play softball throughout the world than play baseball, or women play softball. It's really a men's game out there in the world. They invented it after all. So here we are with this very sort of anemic showing in Japan, 2020, and then the games go to Paris for 2024. I don't think Paris cares about baseball. I know that there's a couple of players there, and there's like a tiny national team program and stuff, but there's not something like the juggernaut of Japan that loves stick and ball sports, right? So is it going to stay in for the Paris Games? They're going to build a bunch of baseball fields to have this tournament? I don't see any of this happening. They could surprise me. I could be wrong, because then the Olympics come to Los Angeles in 2028. And this country does care about baseball and does care about softball. So anyway, my point is these federations are not serving their people because they have this agenda that's very focused on success and winning. And when has sport ever really been about that? Yes, it's competitive, and yes, everyone likes to win, but youth sports should be about teamwork and learning that everyone has a place on the team, and you know, just camaraderie and teamwork and things that really aren't about whether or not you're going to get paid to do this someday, or you're going to win a gold medal and bring it home to your country someday. Those are such tiny percentages of what's really happening. If there's 6 million kids playing Little League Baseball, how many of them are going to win a gold medal for baseball or softball? So it's just something to think about. I wish it was more of a democratic process. I wish it was a more transparent process. I wish there was something that we could actually do and call somebody up and say, hey, so what's with the whole deal here of that, Baseball UK gets some funding from their federation and they give it to the girls softball team because they want them to get into the Olympics. And so all these other programs, including men's baseball there, get left behind. It's like, certainly in this world, there's enough money to go around for everyone. So it's just something to think about, that we trust in these organizations, but we don't really know anything about them. And they don't seem to be working for the membership's goals. They seem to be working for their own goals, which are more about prestige and power than they are about creating opportunity. So that's my thought on the subject. Thanks for bearing with me on this kind of stumbly video. If you do like the content here on Thrill Like a Girl TV, kindly subscribe. If you click the bell button that's down there on the bar right underneath this video window, you'll get a notification when we post new videos. It is our goal to post them on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Don't always get that because we're editing Thrill Like a Girl, the documentary right now, but that is the goal. But if you click the bell button, you'll get the notification when we do post a video, if we're early or late or something like that. And please share it. Like us on social media. We're TLAG Movie on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. And Facebook is kind of our clearinghouse for articles and information and opportunities that we come across to let people know that, there's an application right now for the girls' high school baseball series that's sponsored by MLB and USA Baseball. So those kind of things show up on our Facebook page. So I hope that you will join us on this journey and comment below if you have any thoughts about if you think the federations are doing a great job, if you think they should listen to us more, how we can get them to listen to us. And I'm signing out. I'll see you on the bases. Thanks so much.